is not working, yes? You'll notice that when you come up to me and you ask me how I'm doing, I'm always going to say, fantastic. When somebody say fine, I'm thinking, oh, you poor thing. What is it like to be in that body, to be fine? Fine is not okay. Most organizations run around, they have fine people. They're not up to a game. We got to get up to the game. Here's another bank. They are from New Mexico. This is a bank that absolutely transformed. They came to me with some cultural issues. They were already a high-performing bank with a 2 ROA. That's a high-performing bank. But they said, we can do better. And so they were already in the nosebleed section, and we took them to a much higher level of nosebleed very quickly because Cody, when we got started, was during COVID. He used to call me. I have a home here in Naples, and he would call me because he was in New Mexico time every Friday night about 4 or 5 o'clock, and we were about to have our little neighborhood party for COVID where we'd all pull out our lawn chairs and sit 4 feet from each other, and because we were all terrified that we'd kill each other. But Cody would always call me every week, and he'd say, Roxanne, is it me? Why can't I get this culture fixed? Is it me? Should I just quit and get somebody else in this position? I said, no, Cody, you're fine. You got some jerks. Anybody have some jerks that work in your team? Yes? Okay. Some of you are lying. Okay, all right. But look at the transformation that happened just by him getting into that game. Here's Patty Steele. Patty Steele was the assistant to the CEO at the time we started working with them. They didn't tell me, and they told me when I went back down to see them 30 days later, they said, well, we weren't going to tell you this when we first got started because we thought you wouldn't take us on, but we basically had determined if this wasn't going to work, we were going to sell the bank. Well, 30 days later, they said they grew more than they had in the previous 10 years combined. They are now one of the revered banks in this country. As you can see, they're ranked 94th nationwide, and that's after doing an acquisition every single year, which basically takes banks and puts them on their ear for a couple of years. They just did an acquisition, and they're still over 2.2 ROA. Don't say that it can't be done when people are doing this. Now, all of this is happening in a world where most banks are looking at like a 2 net interest margin, and many of the banks are well under a 4 in return on assets. In other words, they're not going to make it unless something happens fast. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to the predictable profit playbook. Can be used in your family office, in your investment, in the organizations that you're using to understand the basics of how do you tie people to profit and get them winning and getting them engaged to make that happen. So anybody excited to see this? I'm not hearing it. You're nodding your head, but I want some excitement for this. Yes? Okay, let's do this. Okay, so there we go. We're going to start off with deposit quality. So what I always do is I say, where is the biggest hole in the bucket? There's all these resources going into the top of every bucket in a business, yes? So you've got marketing, you've got payroll expenses, and you've got new acquisition costs of new customers. And so you have all of these resources going into the top, but in the bottom of the bucket, you've got to look to see what is the biggest hole. For most banks, right now, it's deposits. They can't grow if they don't have deposits. They can't prosper if they have to pay up for deposits. If you see a bank that's advertising a CD up on a billboard, short their stock. They're in trouble, okay? Because they haven't figured out you can't make money when you're paying a lot for CDs. It means that they haven't developed the skill set to go do something differently. So it's all about getting it done, not in years, but in months. Let me introduce you to this young lady, Christine Hankins. When I did a kickoff at this bank, this also was a bank that was on the verge of having to sell. They went from $300 million in assets to $200 million in assets in 2 years. They were shrinking, they were unprofitable, and they said they need to do something different or this isn't going to work. We started working, and on the day that her very first day starting in the bank, she started as a teller, a drive-through teller, and on that day, she got very turned on about the things I'm going to show you and the excitement. And so she actually went into this thing that we created called the Accredited Banking Professional Program, which is basically designed like how do you work with the affluent and add value. Most bankers, all they can do is quote you the rate sheet and give you the terms on something. They don't know how to transform your business, transform your finances. They're not bringing skill to the game. We're living in a world where skill is what you get paid for. So this young lady, in a $200 million bank, mind you, while she was doing her practice calls that we have them do while they're going through the certification, she brought in $14 million in non-interest-bearing deposits, in other words, free money, and another $6 million in deposits in 4 months. From being a teller to bringing in 10% of the assets of the bank in 4 months. Yes, she was promoted. Yes, she became the president. Yes, they recently put her onto the board. And yes, this took even to the board in less than 5 years. See, everybody's worried about our young people. I love our young people. You give them a game plan. You know, everybody's complaining. They all want to rise to the top so quickly. Well, guess what? Let them rise to the top quickly. I have so many 20-somethings right now as executives of banks, and they are far outperforming the other executives who have these old crusty ideas, and they haven't tried anything new, and they have not been developing their skill sets to make things happen. So Patty, when I started working with their bank, they were having a huge deposit problem, and then they completely transformed their deposits. But here's the interesting story. She was sitting in a seminar. I do this thing called a Breakthrough Banking Boot Camp. And as we're sitting in that boot camp, I'm doing a presentation, and she comes up during the break, and she says, "You just got done telling them that deposits are easy." And I looked around the room, and they don't believe you. But I've been doing what you've been telling me, and deposits are easy. And right now, this bank is swimming in deposits, because they figured out the game of how to make that happen. So I want all of you to think about the biggest hole in your bucket. If you're not running a bank, it's not deposits, but you got a big hole in a bucket in whatever business you're on the board on. What is the biggest hole in the bucket? And then what do you need to do? And it's usually through extreme mastery and skill set that you can move through to create that kind of result. But I want to get into what is the real transformation, and to understand that we need to talk about that culture is about what drives performance. There are hundreds of studies that have proven the same thing. Culture is the leading predictor of future growth and profitability. But most people understand culture all wrong. They just think it's a happy bus, but it's not. It's a happy bus called going someplace called profitability. Let's figure out and see what that looks like. So it's all about the hard numbers. So we did a nationwide study. And in that study, we looked at 1,000 participants all across the United States, equally distributed amongst different age groups, evenly distributed amongst different kinds of responsibilities. And so all the PhDs got together, put this thing together. And here's what we found. We asked people, do you perform in the top 10%? Anybody else besides me alarmed? 75% believe they perform